And today we're going to talk about the third part of the Michael Bast story. We talked about his beginning, about the 70s, how he dominated the speedway world. Today we're going to talk about some more accomplishments of Michael Bast. Also, we're going to talk more about Bruce the Fox Penhall and his relationship with Michael Bast. And also, I had a few races with the master also in the 70s, and we're going to talk about that right now. Did you know Michael Bast was a Hollywood stuntman? That's right, a Hollywood stuntman. He's an amazing motorcycle rider, not only speedway rider. In 1974, Michael Bast did the stunt for Freebie and the Bean, James Caan. He went ahead and rode that motorcycle over the cars over and over. I read a whole story about that. And Michael Bast went ahead and they just gave Michael like a trials bike and they said, "Mike, can you do it?" And he goes, "No problem." He rode over it the first take. He did a perfect job. I watched that movie. Did you see that? I watched it in the theaters years ago. It came out in '74. Then Mike did a stunt in 1976 for Cannonball Run. He was the motorcycle stuntman in that movie. And also in '79, he did Fast Charlie's. He was in the movie Fast Charlie's. He was the motorcycle stuntman. Enough of the movies. Let's get back to Speedway. In 1976, Mike was picked to race for the Los Angeles Sprockets in the National Speedway League. And a young Bruce, the Fox Penhall, was actually teamed up with Mike on that speedway team. Bruce was just a young kid. He was not a champion at the time. He was just learning and a perfect timing. Everything has good timing. And Bruce, the Fox Penhall, he had perfect timing to team up with Michael Bast. Michael got a chance to go ahead and teach Bruce all the different things about racing. The lessons that Mike taught Bruce was invaluable. Mike was the coach of Bruce, and Bruce later became back-to-back United States champion and back-to-back world champion. Bruce Penhall actually credits a lot of his success to who? Michael Bast. The young Bruce was number 2 in the National Speedway League with over 11 points per match. And he was number 2 best rider in the league. And who was number 1? You got it. Michael Bast with an average of over 13 points per match. And I had at least 3 rides against Michael Bast that I can remember. One was just a regular race. My bike broke and I was racing Kelly Moran and Michael Bast. Ken Melee said, "You want to ride my Melee bike?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" The gearing was wrong, and I went ahead and sucked. And Michael Bast and Kelly Moran kicked my bungholio. And the next race that I can remember racing against the master, now this was in the 70s when he was hot, was at the Santa Ana Bowl, the quarter-mile speedway track, and it was the world qualifier. And I was doing really good. I was like competing for a podium spot, and I raced Michael Bast. And I went ahead, and I guess Michael just got me. He went ahead, and he's the master. He got me. And that 1 point I dropped, it caused me to get 4th place in that meet and off the podium. If I had won that race, I would have been 3rd place in that event, which Denny Pyatt won and Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz was 2nd place. Yeah, I should have won Mike. That really sucked because Mike got like 5th or 6th place in that event. And I should have beat him, but guess what? Mike Bast is the master. The last race that I raced against Michael Bast was a pretty good one. It was in that world qualifier. They moved it up to Sacramento in Northern California on the short track about Costa Mesa size. And the first race I raced Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz. he got the gate on me, and I went ahead and rode really hard, probably my closest race I ever did, and I pushed Bobby Schwartz off the pole. Then the next race was against the master, Mike Bast. This was in like 1976 when Mike was a United States champion. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm racing against the master. And I said, Brian, you got to give it all you got. And the tape went up, and I just went ahead and had a great start. I can't remember what pole position I was in, but I went ahead and I beat the master. And it was really great. It was a scratch race. This is all scratch racing. And after the race, I pulled my bike in the pits, and I was like, you just beat Mike Bast. He's like my idol. And I'm sitting there, I'm kind of tired, you know, like, and my bike's there, and Mike comes running over to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna kill me for beating him. And Mike come over, and he's a very nice guy, and he said, hey Brian, what do you have in that engine? It's really fast. And I'm like, my heart dropped, and I'm like, Michael Bast is complimenting me. My hero is coming up to me, like, calling me by my first name. And I told him, I have a Jerry Fairchild engine, Mike, and it's really fast. I am no legend in Speedway. I almost don't consider myself a good rider. I can't compare myself with Bruce Penhall and Michael Bast, but they are the legends. They are the masters, and I am almost nothing. And two of my greatest accomplishments was one of those I just talked about, when Michael Bast came up to me after I beat him in a scratch world qualifier race, and he said, like, what do you have in that engine, Brian? He called me by my name, Michael Bast. He probably doesn't remember that. And the second one was a handicap main event. I went ahead and did pretty good that night. It was at Ventura Speedway. I was at the 10-yard line, so I was a low yardage rider. And Bruce the Fox Penhall, of course, was at the 50 with the Moran brothers, Schwartz, all these living legends, and I'm like, oh. And I went ahead and gave it all I had. I held Bruce off for like 3 or 4 laps, and Bruce caught me, and I went faster and faster, and I held Bruce off for that main event win. I was just a punky 17-year-old kid and racing Mike Bast and Bruce Penhall. That was amazing. I had a goal of just doing that, and I did it. And Michael Bast was just the master. He won like 7 United States championships in the 70s, like I mentioned. He's just an amazing rider. Michael Bast was truly the machine. He was the greatest American speedway rider in that era. Michael Bast was one of the greatest speedway riders ever. He's in the top 3 of all time in speedway history. We have more videos right here, and you can go ahead and check out more of Michael Bast, amazing rider. And you can subscribe if you like the content of this channel. Thank you so much for watching the 1970s domination of Michael Bast, and we're gonna do one more. So please like, share, subscribe, and always ring that bell.